Welcome to the MWH Horror. This channel specializes in sharing both real and creative horror animation stories. Our goal is not only to entertain, but also to deliver meaningful lessons through horror content. If you enjoy the content on this channel, don't forget to support us by leaving a like, a comment, or even better, subscribing to the channel. Where are you watching this video from and at what time? Leave a comment so we can connect with each other. And now, let's dive into today's horror stories.
I never thought my senior year would end that way. I should have seen the warning signs. But at 17, I wasn't thinking about things like that. I grew up in a small, quiet, and safe town. Everyone knew each other, and if you did something stupid, you could bet your parents would know before you even got home. It was all fine until I fell in with the wrong crowd. My group consisted of 3 people, me, Ryan, and Derek. Ryan was different. He genuinely believed in devil worship. At first I thought it was just an act, or a way to get attention. Then there was Derek, who wasn't like Ryan, at least not at first. He was a kid from a broken home, just like me. Derek spent more time at Ryan's house than at his own. He had a quiet anger, a dangerous kind of anger. I think I stuck with them just because there weren't any other options in this small town. It was the week before Halloween, and Ryan told us he was going to throw a costume party since his parents were out of town. That night, the house was packed. Ryan promised there would be a surprise. "Something you guys will never forget," he said with his eyes lit up. I thought it was just a joke. Maybe a seance or some stupid scare prank to mess with the girls. I was terribly wrong. Around 11 p.m., Ryan called us down to the basement. His dad had turned it into a game room with couches, a pool table, and a big TV for video games. But when I walked into the room, the atmosphere was different. Everyone was sitting in a circle, muttering, their eyes fixed on a door in the corner. Ryan and Derek were standing next to the door, grinning as if they were about to perform a show. Ryan yanked the door open, and I felt a wave of panic. Inside was a woman, tied up and gagged. I knew her, and so did everyone else in town. She was a homeless person who always wandered the streets, collecting cans and muttering to herself. "What the hell is this?" I asked. Ryan just smiled and said, "Tonight, we're playing a game." Derek walked over, holding a set of darts, and announced, "A living dartboard." Laughter erupted throughout the room. I wanted to believe it was just a prank, that they would untie her and let her go, laughing at how scared we all were. But then, Ryan threw the first dart. It stuck in her arm. She let out a helpless cry through her gag, and her body twisted in pain. Everyone just stood there, watching. Their eyes were so emotionless. Then, Derek threw another one, which landed right below her collarbone. I couldn't move. My feet felt like they were nailed to the floor. Then others started throwing darts. Not everyone, but some just sat there as still as I was. Things had gone too far, and I had been wrong about Ryan. "This is crazy. Let her go," I finally said, my voice cracking. Ryan turned to look at me and his smile disappeared. "You don't get it? This isn't just a game." Derek reached into a black bag and pulled out a long knife. "We're offering her to the master." I was disgusted. They weren't just playing a game. They were going to kill her. I turned to leave, but Ryan's older brother, who had been filming the entire thing, was blocking the door. "If you leave, this tape goes to the cops or your parents," Ryan said. He made sure all of us were guilty. I glanced around. Everyone was in costumes, so I couldn't see their expressions, but I could hear crying starting to spread. Then a girl whispered in my ear, "I'm calling the police." She had hidden her phone in her purse. I stood in front of her, blocking the view as she made the call. Meanwhile, Ryan had dragged the woman to the center of the room, placing her in a circle drawn with white chalk. Ryan raised the knife, his face wild. The woman struggled, trying to scream but couldn't. And then a siren blared, and flashing red and blue lights shone on the basement windows. Ryan's face twisted in anger as he turned to us. "Which one of you a-holes did it?" I lunged straight at him, my shoulder hitting his ribs, making him stumble backward and fall. The knife dropped to the floor. Derek ran to pick it up, but I was faster. I grabbed the knife and cut the ropes on the woman's wrists. The basement was in chaos. Everyone was running, pushing each other up the stairs. Some people stood there, frozen in fear. The woman was finally free. She ripped off the gag and let out a painful scream. The basement door burst open. The police stormed in. Ryan was still trying to get the knife when they restrained him. Derek ran but was caught shortly after. We were interrogated for hours. Most of us weren't charged because we were spectators, not participants. But Ryan and Derek were different. Ryan was sentenced to life in prison. Derek got 25 years, and Ryan's brother got 15 years. I still see their faces in my nightmares. I left town as soon as I could, moved states, changed my phone number, and cut off contact with anyone who reminded me of that night. To this day, I never dare to go to another costume party again. When the police found Sam in the dark room of that broken-down mobile home, he had been bound and tortured for 730 days. It all started with a gentle smile at Oktoberfest. 5 years ago in the fall, my two brothers and I decided to go to the annual Oktoberfest in Münster. It's a tradition in our small town nestled in the Texas hills. It took us about an hour and a half to drive to Münster. I was 27 at the time. My older brother Jake was 30, and my youngest brother Sam was 23. The three of us have always been close, especially with our shared passion for classic cars. The festival had a huge car show, and that was the main reason we went. We parked near the edge of the trees and started the 15-minute walk into town. It was mid-morning, and everything seemed normal until she appeared. Just before we walked up the second bridge, a woman approached us. She was about 25 years old, with long hair and a gentle smile. "Excuse me, I'm looking for the festival." "Can you help me?" she asked. I was a little confused. It was strange. The festival was right in front of us. The noise from the rides, the music, and the laughter filled the air. It wasn't hard to find. "We're heading there now. Just cross the bridge and you'll see everything. I'm looking for the market. Do you know where it is?" Sam, the most enthusiastic of us, spoke up. "I can take you there. It's not far." I hesitated, but Jake patted Sam on the back. "See you at the car show later," Jake said. Sam nodded, waved lightly, and went with the woman. Jake and I spent the next few hours at the car show, completely engrossed in the rows of restored classic cars. It wasn't until midday that I glanced at my watch and realized Sam hadn't come back yet. At first, we weren't worried. Maybe he was still with the woman, helping her find her way. But by 2 p.m., we started to feel uneasy. We walked all over the festival searching, but we couldn't find Sam. We tried to call him, but his phone just rang and no one picked up. We were finally desperate. We went to the local police officer on duty at the festival and told him our brother was missing. The officer reported it on his radio, but with the festival at its busiest, the search was like looking for a needle in a haystack. Late at night, the festival had closed. The streets that were once bustling were empty, and Sam was nowhere to be found. We walked back to the parking lot, hoping Sam would be there, but there was no one. We checked into a cheap roadside motel, leaving a message for Sam, hoping he would call back. By the next morning, the reality that Sam was gone had hit us. We filed a missing person report at the local police station. Over the next week, we searched all over town, put up missing posters, and checked every gas station, motel. Everything was hopeless. 2 years passed, and we had almost given up hope. Then, right before Christmas, we got a phone call. The police chief called. "We've found Sam. The family needs to get here immediately." Jake and I dropped everything and drove there that night. The police chief told us what had happened. The police had raided a broken-down mobile home on the outskirts of town after neighbors reported suspicious activity. They found illegal drugs, weapons, and stolen property. And in one of the back rooms, they found Sam. He was in the worst possible condition. Bound, malnourished, beaten, and drugged for the past 2 years. Sam was then taken to the hospital. Thank God he was completely aware. He remembered everything that had happened. Sam said the woman had lured him into an alley. 3 men attacked Sam. They threw him into the back of a pickup truck and took him to the mobile home. For 2 years, Sam was bound and tortured. He tried to escape twice and was beaten so badly that he thought he would die. Those men were part of a human trafficking ring, and Sam wasn't their first victim. Those monsters were arrested and sentenced to life in prison. The woman who lured Sam has still not been found. Sam survived and came back, but he was never the same again. To this day, I still can't shake the feeling of guilt about Sam. There are many other victims, people who were not as lucky as Sam. So if you're ever at a small town festival and someone is too friendly and asks for help, think carefully before you go with them. There are nights I still wake up to the sound of that crash. But what haunts me the most isn't the accident. It's what happened afterward. I grew up in a coal camp in a small town in West Virginia. We lived in a working-class neighborhood. My parents worked hard to make a living, and I lived with my 5 siblings. Our town was also very small. It was so small that it eventually merged with a bigger town and no longer exists. Jim Hatfield, who would later become my husband, came from a very wealthy family. His family owned almost all the timber companies in West Virginia, even nearly half the state. Despite being the heir to the family fortune, Jim didn't want to continue his family's timber business. Instead, he chose to work in the coal mines, just like many other workers. This is where he met my father. After a few weeks of working together, Jim asked my father if he could date me. Despite worrying about the wealth gap between our families, my father agreed. Over the next few months, Jim took me on several dates. Everything seemed to be going very well. One night, after getting drunk at a bar, Jim couldn't drive himself home. He was so drunk he couldn't stand up, slurring his words and asking me to drive him. That's when our story took a turn I never could have expected. As we were driving home, a man suddenly stepped out in front of the car. I didn't have time to brake, and in an instant, the car hit him. Despite being drunk, Jim seemed calm. Jim told me to switch to the passenger seat. Then he got up, dragged the man's body off the road, put it in the trunk, and continued to drive. He took me onto a dirt road, where we arrived at a wooden house. I wondered how a person who was so drunk just moments ago could lift a heavy body and drive so carefully. I thought maybe the fear had made him sober up instantly. Jim told me I needed to go with him up the mountain and that he had a plan. When we got to the top of the mountain, there was a secluded cabin. Jim said it was his family's cabin and that he wanted me to stay there for a few weeks. He explained that he owned a 1955 Mercedes Gullwing and that he was one of only 5 people in the entire county who had one. Jim said that people would eventually notice the man was missing, and if there were any car parts on the road from the accident, all suspicion would fall on him. If the other owners had alibis, then I, as the driver when Jim was drunk, would be charged with murder. At that moment, I wasn't clear-headed enough to think or calculate anything. I agreed with everything Jim suggested and wrote a letter to my parents. The purpose was to make them think I was visiting a friend in Tennessee and would be back in a few weeks. During my time at the cabin, I had everything I needed. Jim brought me food and other supplies, but I wasn't comfortable at all. The first few days in the cabin, I could barely sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that man appearing in front of the car. The loud noise when the car hit him kept ringing in my head. The nights were the worst. Every sound made me jump. Sometimes I thought I heard the footsteps of that man, as if his soul was looking for me. Jim said everything would be okay, but I knew it would never be okay. I had caused a man's death. About 2 months passed. Jim said everything was fine and that I could go home. My peaceful life from before had completely disappeared. Every time I left the house, I felt like hundreds of eyes were staring at me. I kept thinking everyone knew about that night. Maybe someone saw me and Jim driving away in the dark. I always kept my head down, avoiding eye contact with others. Every conversation made me nervous. When someone asked me where I had been for 2 months, my heart would pound. The sound of footsteps behind me always made me jump. I would turn my head to look back, trying to control my movements so no one would notice. At that moment, I thought, is the police following me? Do they suspect something? Then one day, Jim proposed to me. I wasn't completely comfortable with this marriage, but I also loved Jim and felt his sincerity. Jim also held that terrible secret, and I agreed. Life seemed to be stable and happy. I didn't have to worry about money anymore. I could even help my family. I found out I was pregnant shortly after. One day, I went to the local doctor for a checkup, and I happened to see the man who was the victim in the car accident. I couldn't believe my eyes. He was standing there, healthy, as if nothing had ever happened. I was so shocked that I couldn't stand up and told the receptionist to take me home. I was nauseous all day, waiting for Jim to come home to tell him what I had seen. To be honest, I had never asked Jim where he buried the man. This is where everything went crazy. Jim told me that it was all a test. Because he came from a wealthy family, he wanted to find a truly loyal woman, one who didn't love him for his money. I stood there, my mouth open, unable to believe what I had just heard. For months I lived in a nightmare, tormenting myself, thinking I had taken a person's life. I had sleepless nights, staring into the darkness and seeing the man's face. I felt guilt eating away at my soul every day, every hour. I cried and screamed at Jim. The anger and pain mixed into an emotion I couldn't describe. I didn't know whether to feel relieved that I wasn't a murderer or angry that I had been so cruelly deceived. Despite feeling utterly betrayed, despite wanting to scream in anger and helplessness, I still stayed with him. Maybe it was because I was pregnant and what was called family kept me there. We had 3 children after that. I have to admit that to this day we have a family that has everything. Jim truly loves me and our children. But those terrifying memories are something I can never forget. My name is Sarah, and I'm 31 years old. I've been working at the 911 call center in Austin, Texas, for almost 5 years. With experience handling thousands of emergency calls, I was confident that I could predict any situation that might happen. But the call that night will haunt me for the rest of my life. It was a normal night shift. The phone rang, and I picked it up. On the other end was a grumpy man's voice saying he wanted to complain about a noise. When I asked him to give me more details about the situation, The man suddenly yelled, "What?" "I'm sorry, I can't hear you because of all the screaming." I was a little startled by his shouting, but I listened very carefully, and I didn't hear any noise at all. When I told him that, he spoke in an annoyed tone and accused me of thinking he was lying. He was like a child who gets an attitude over the smallest things. But honestly, throughout the entire conversation, I didn't hear any other sounds. He continued to pour out his complaints, his voice becoming more and more tense. According to him, this had been going on for 3 hours straight, and the new neighbors had been causing such a disturbance for 6 months now. He described the loud music, the heavy footsteps that sounded like they were stomping on his head, and the slap sounds coming from the apartment upstairs. I tried to calm him down because I could feel the tension escalating on the other end of the line. He confessed that he was exhausted with these inconsiderate a-holes. He had tried everything, talking to them, contacting the building owner. But they laughed at him with contempt, and the landlord told him to stop hallucinating. The frustration in his voice seemed to be reaching its peak, making me feel anxious. Then everything started to take a disturbing turn. He suddenly mentioned a fight that happened the night before. As usual, that guy and his girlfriend were playing their favorite music and doing their thing to the beat. I was about to lose my mind. He described it as if his brain was about to explode and smoke was coming out of his nostrils. He insisted that he wasn't usually hot-tempered or rude and had never hit anyone. But that night, something compelled him to act. My heart beat a little faster. "Did you get into a physical fight with him?" "Yeah," he answered, a short but cold response. And then the horrifying words began to pour out. The man said he chose the biggest and sharpest knife in the house. He described going upstairs and knocking on the door. When the young couple opened the door, he felt they looked at him with contempt and defiance. They looked at me like I was a lowlife, like they were saying, "I want to torment you." I stabbed the kid right in the neck and face. He didn't scream or say anything. He just fell down. His girlfriend was hiding behind the sofa, shaking like a leaf, with her eyes bulging out. What happened next made me cover my mouth to keep from screaming. The man talked about chasing the girl with the knife in his hand, forcing her back into the living room, throwing her on the sofa, and starting to slash her. I took a deep breath and asked how many times he did that to the girl. Who remembers? At least 100 times. He only stopped when he saw too much blood flowing. He then threw the knife away and left as if nothing had happened. But what gave me goosebumps the most wasn't the brutal actions, but the man's complete lack of emotion after recounting it all. I know I should have called an ambulance for them, but they're not hurt. And then, in an unbelievable absurdity, the man went back to the original reason for his call. His voice was filled with frustration again, just like when he first complained that his neighbors were still playing loud music. Throughout the call, I hadn't heard any other sounds besides his voice. I tried to control my shivers. My mind was in a mess with the horrifying information I had just heard. But I had to keep my voice calm and continue the conversation to buy time for the police to pinpoint his exact location. I reassured him and told him to stay in his apartment and wait for the police to arrive. I couldn't believe that one day I would have to sit and listen to a murderer recount his crime. When the police arrived at the building, they didn't hear any unusual sounds from the apartment upstairs. A complete silence enveloped the entire building. And then, the horrifying truth was revealed step by step. The man, after a thorough investigation, turned out to be a former sharpshooter in the army who had been discharged for serious mental health issues. He was having severe hallucinations. The noises, music, and screaming he heard only existed in his disturbed mind. The horrifying scene was only discovered when he himself called to complain about the noise from the apartment upstairs. The young couple there was dead. There was no one in that apartment to create the sounds he heard, and no one to turn off the music that only existed in his sick imagination. He had killed two innocent people in his hallucination, completely unaware of the true extent of his brutality. In his disturbed mind, he still thought he was just scaring the couple to make them stop the noise. I will never forget that call. It was a terrifying reminder of the destructive power of mental illness if left untreated, and how fragile the line between reality and illusion can be. On my shifts after that, every time the phone rang, I felt a shiver down my spine. My name is Emily. 4 years ago, when I was a sophomore in college, I worked the night shift at a McDonald's in Austin, Texas. I had only moved here a few months ago for a student exchange program. It was a weekend. In the first few hours, everything went as usual. There was a large crowd of customers for a weekend afternoon. Around 3 p.m., a man walked in. He was tall with short brown hair, wearing a gray t-shirt and jeans. "2 Big Macs," he said in a short sentence. I asked if he wanted a drink, but he shook his head. I entered the order into the computer, gave him the total, and handed him the receipt. He paid with cash, took the receipt, and stood to the side to wait for his food. I continued to serve the next customers. A few minutes later, after I had just finished a family's order, the man came back to the counter. This time, his face showed clear signs of frustration. "Hey, you charged me for 2 Big Macs, but I only ordered 1. I was stunned. I remembered very clearly that he said, 2 Big Macs. His voice was very clear. There was no ambiguity. "I remember you ordered 2 Big Macs, sir." His face suddenly turned red. "Don't put words in my mouth." I know what I said. His voice was now significantly louder. A few other customers started turning to look at us. I had never encountered such an angry customer before, so I was a bit flustered. "I'm sorry, sir. I didn't mean that. There might have been a misunderstanding." "Don't get slick with me." He slammed his hand on the counter. "I only ordered 1 Big Mac." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice calm and professional. "I apologize for the confusion. Can I refund you for 1 Big Mac?" "No. You should be fired. You don't deserve to work here," he yelled, his voice echoing through the restaurant. By now, every customer was looking at us. Just then, Jack, my co-worker on the same shift, came over. He had almost 2 years of experience, so he was very calm. The man immediately turned his anger toward Jack, explaining how he had been overcharged. Jack listened patiently. After a few minutes of talking, the man shook his head. "Forget it. I just want my money back and to get out of here." Jack nodded and motioned for me. I refunded the money with shaking hands. He snatched the money and put it in his pocket. The man turned to leave and Jack patted me on the shoulder, signaling that everything was okay. But then, the man suddenly turned back. He leaned over the counter, getting close to me. "When you get off work, I'll be waiting for you." His voice was now cold and calculated. He said the words very slowly, one by one, as if he wanted to make sure I understood their meaning. I froze, just looking at him with wide eyes. Jack also heard him. He moved closer, but the man had already turned around and walked out of the restaurant. I stood there for a few seconds, my heart pounding like a drum. Jack asked if I was okay, and I tried to act calm. But honestly, I didn't know how to interpret that comment. Was it a threat, or just a way to express his frustration? I wasn't too worried about the threat. as I had just started my 8-hour shift. I didn't think a man would wait that long, and I didn't think he would actually do it. I continued to work the rest of my shift. Everything went smoothly, and by the time I was off, I had completely forgotten about the incident. When my shift was over, I walked out the back door of the restaurant. The parking lot was quite dark. I walked quickly toward my car, constantly looking around. When I got close to my car, I saw a white pickup truck parked on the opposite side of the lot, about 30 yards from my car. Suddenly, the pickup truck door opened, and that man got out. Had he been waiting there for 7 hours? He started walking toward me. I ran toward my car, my hands shaking as I fumbled for my keys in my purse. "Emily!" He yelled my name. He ran over and managed to grab my arm. He pulled hard, trying to drag me away from the car. I was screaming and in complete panic. In the struggle, I remembered the pepper spray in my purse. I pulled it out and sprayed it wildly. He yelled, let go of my arm, and backed away. I quickly jumped into my car and locked the doors, out of breath from the struggle. He was still there, cursing and trying to wipe the pepper spray out of his eyes. Just then, Jack and the manager ran out. They must have heard my screams. When he saw the two men, the man quickly turned and ran toward his pickup truck. He started the engine and sped off. Jack ran to me and I recounted what had just happened, my voice choked with tears. It was him. He really waited. The manager immediately called the police. Jack sat next to me, trying to comfort me while we waited. The police arrived 10 minutes later. They took my statement and a description of the man. The police said they would search for him and increase patrols in the area. They told me to report it immediately if I saw him again. 4 years have passed, and I've never seen him again. But I will never forget that terrifying night. He spent all day nurturing his anger, and the reason was all because of a Big Mac. My name is Erica. I was born and raised in Texas with my parents in a quiet residential neighborhood on the outskirts of the city. We lived in a small house with a spacious backyard that my dog Molly loved. This happened when I was 18. One day, I was walking Molly. The familiar road passed 2 tall apartment buildings where I often saw my neighbors coming and going. That day, 3 men were smoking on the front porch. Their laughter echoed from a distance. 2 of them didn't notice me, but the other guy stared. He looked older than the other 2, probably in his late 30s, and was bald. His eyes made me a little scared. I quickly turned my face away, trying to walk faster. Suddenly he called from behind, "Hey, little lady, your dog is so cute. Come here and let me pet it." While he was taunting me, the other 2 men burst out laughing. I immediately left and quickly ran home, not daring to look back. At first, I didn't tell my parents, thinking it was just a harmless joke. But I was completely wrong. The next day, I walked Molly again. Remembering the 3 men from yesterday, I brought pepper spray just in case. When I passed the same house, I silently prayed not to see that strange man. But he was already sitting on the rocking chair on the porch, his eyes staring at me. I quickly ran across the street as soon as I saw him. The sound of heavy footsteps behind me told me he was chasing me. In a panic, I tripped and fell. He was right behind me. I screamed for help, hoping someone would hear me. His dirty hand covered my mouth, followed by a laugh of amusement. Luckily, I remembered the pepper spray. I quickly took it out and sprayed it directly into his eyes. He yelled in pain and let go of me, cursing repeatedly. I quickly picked up Molly and ran home as fast as I could. As soon as I got home, I immediately told my parents what happened. My dad, a former Marine, was about to go handle the guy himself. but my mom advised me to go to the police station. There, I gave my statement to the officer and showed him the scratches on my knee, but he just took a few notes and told me they would patrol the area. A few months passed. I started working at a 7-Eleven to earn some extra money. One night after my shift, as I turned the corner near my house, I noticed an old truck driving very slowly behind me. At first, I didn't think anything of it, but when I got in front of my house, I looked back and saw two men in the truck staring at me. A familiar feeling of fear came over me. I knew for sure they were following me. I quickly went inside and told my parents. A few weeks later, my dad started watching the front of our house at night. He installed more motion sensor lights and security cameras, but those measures were not enough for what was about to happen. That terrifying night started around 2 a.m. Molly's fierce barking came from outside the window. I was in a deep sleep after a long, tiring shift. The barking became more and more urgent, as if it was signaling danger, but my exhaustion made me ignore Molly. I'm not sure how long after Molly's voice woke me up again, but it took a few seconds for me to realize it was a weak whimper. I jumped up and ran to find Molly. I froze when I saw Molly lying motionless on the floor. A red liquid was spreading under her small body. Her eyes were wide open, looking at me with a look of painful despair. I started to cry and quickly picked Molly up. A dark shadow appeared from the corner of the room. The bald man walked out. He laughed with delight. "Did you think you could get away from me, little girl?" Terror took over my entire body. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. He lunged at me with terrifying speed. His heavy body pinned me down, making it hard to breathe. He repeatedly punched me in the face. The pain spread all over my head, and my ears were ringing. I felt blood flowing from my nose, and a salty taste spread through my mouth. With my last bit of strength, I tried to struggle and kicked wildly at him. When I saw him start to unbuckle his belt, my terror peaked. I screamed with all the strength I had left. His dirty hand covered my mouth. Tears streamed down my face. I thought my life was over. Suddenly, the bedroom door burst open. My dad yelled, his face red with anger, holding a gun pointed directly at the man. My mom stood behind him, her face pale with fear. 2 gunshots rang out, shaking the entire room. I pushed him off me and collapsed on the floor, shaking uncontrollably. My dad quickly rushed over and took the man down. My mom ran to me, hugged me tightly, and called the police. I looked at Molly. My little friend was still in a pool of blood, but wagged her tail slightly when she heard my voice. Molly was alive. A few minutes later, the police arrived and arrested the man. But it wasn't just him. They found his 2 accomplices tied up in the backyard. They had also been part of this terrifying plan. They intended to break in, kidnap, and assault me. Luckily, they were all caught and later sentenced. Molly was taken to the vet in time and made a full recovery. To this day, I still live with my parents because the fear of being alone still haunts me. Molly is old now, but still healthy. I spend more time with Molly, always appreciating and grateful for my loyal friend who saved my life. 3 years have passed, but I still can't forget the face of the man in the black hoodie. Even though everyone says it was just a nightmare, I know what I saw on that security monitor that night was real. My name is Taylor. At the time, I was 16 years old and often took jobs house-sitting and dog-sitting for the Carson family. My dad was good friends with Mr. Carson, so I had been going to their house since I was a kid. The Carson family's mansion was in Jackson, Michigan. From the main gate to the house was a long driveway. The 2-story house had a classic Victorian architectural style, with 3 bedrooms and a spacious guest room. It took me over an hour to drive from my house to theirs. Around 9 p.m., I made some popcorn and watched a movie on Netflix. The two dogs lay quietly next to me, but I noticed they kept perking up their ears as if they were listening to something. I muted the TV to hear better, but there was nothing. After a while, I decided to go to bed. The guest room was on the first floor. The two dogs slept with me. They lay on a furry rug next to the bed. Around midnight, I was woken up by a jingling sound. I realized it was the dogs' collars. They were both sitting straight up, ears perked, eyes staring at the door with a very cautious look. I lay motionless, straining to listen. The house was still silent, with only the tick-tock of the clock in the hallway. Then I heard a humming sound, like the static you hear when a radio loses its signal. I remembered the baby monitor that Mrs. Carson kept in the corner of the hallway, directly across from my room. This system not only showed images from the camera placed in the main living room on the first floor, but could also be controlled remotely to turn lights on and off in different rooms. I tiptoed out of the bedroom. I approached the security monitor in the hallway. On the screen was a pitch-black image of the main living room. After fumbling for a bit, I found the button to turn on the main living room light. I hesitated for a moment, then pressed the button. A blinding light from the large chandelier lit up the entire living room on the monitor. And in that moment, I saw him. A young man, wearing a black hoodie, was hunched behind the sofa. He looked up at the ceiling where the camera was mounted, and I looked at him on the small screen. He jumped up and ran out of the camera's view. My body reacted before my mind could think. I ran back to the bedroom and locked the door tightly, quickly grabbing my essentials into my backpack. There was no time to think. I opened the bedroom window and climbed out. I could still hear the two dogs barking loudly inside the house. I ran as fast as I could toward my car, not daring to look back. As soon as I got into the driver's seat, I immediately locked all the doors, started the engine, and sped away. I tried to call the Carsons, but my call went straight to voicemail. When I got home, I sent a long text message explaining everything that had happened to both Mr. and Mrs. Carson. The next morning, Mr. Carson called back. His voice sounded worried, but also skeptical. "Taylor, we're very worried about you. We drove home right after we got your message. We checked the whole house, from the basement to the attic, and there were no signs of a break-in. Nothing was missing either, except for the two dogs being locked in the living room." Mrs. Carson took the phone and said, "Our security system is very good. No one could have broken in, so they didn't believe me. But I remembered every detail of what I had seen on that security monitor. From that day on, I refused all of the Carson family's offers for dog sitting. Even though many years have passed, I still can't forget the moment I saw his face on that security monitor. The Carson family's skepticism couldn't erase the image of the man in the black hoodie. What I went through that night still haunts me. I thought I had done everything to become beautiful, but I didn't know that the price of beauty was my life. I'm Kate, 25 years old, working at a marketing company. Every morning I tried to fit in with the other girls in the office. My colleagues were all beautiful girls who always wore fashionable clothes. I, on the other hand, always felt like a bowling ball. I was over 6 feet tall, but weighed almost 300 pounds. For me, the most haunting thing wasn't horror stories. It was my own weight and appearance. That day, a colleague sitting next to me giggled when she saw my baggy clothes. She pointed and said something to another colleague with a look of contempt. The ridicule wasn't new, but it was like a knife wound that hurt me more each time. I bowed my head, pretending to be busy with the papers on my desk. my cheeks burning with shame and wanting to disappear from the room. That afternoon, on the train ride home, I huddled in the corner of a car. My mind was still reeling from the mockery at work. A woman walked over and asked if she could sit next to me. I looked up and was overwhelmed by her beauty. Her hair was shiny, her skin was flawless, and she had a perfect body. She introduced herself as Grace and sat down next to me. The faint, pleasant scent from her body was lovely. Grace looked at me with curiosity. I, on the other hand, felt incredibly shy and insecure in the face of her beauty. But Grace started complimenting me on my beautiful eyes and balanced facial features. My heart pounded. No one had ever complimented me like that before. She said she worked in the modeling industry and saw potential in me. It was hard to believe, even ridiculous. You just need to lose a little weight. Grace kept a bright smile on her face, and I felt the sincerity in her voice. Grace pulled a piece of paper and a small bottle of pills from her handbag. She explained that this was the latest product from a lab in New York, that it had miraculous effects, and that in just 1 week I would see a complete difference. I looked at the bottle in Grace's hand. Inside were small white pills with no label or information. Grace held the bottle out to me and said it was a gift. When the train stopped, Grace stood up, waved goodbye, and disappeared into the crowd. I sat there, clutching the bottle in my hand, with a sense of bewilderment. When I got home, I sat in front of the mirror and took a good look at my plump body. Grace's words echoed in my head. She was right. I needed to lose weight. If I were thinner and prettier, maybe my colleagues would stop making fun of me. I opened the bottle and took out a few pills. Taking a deep breath, I swallowed them with a glass of cold water. They didn't have any special taste. That night, I slept very soundly. The next morning, as soon as I opened my eyes, I felt my body was strangely light. I sat up and looked down at my hands. Oh my God. My fingers had become long and slender, the joints clearly visible under the tight, thin skin. I ran to the mirror, my heart pounding. The face in the mirror was no longer mine. My body had lost at least 50 pounds in just 1 night. I stood in front of the mirror, trembling as I touched my cheeks. It was all real. A feeling of joy mixed with confusion exploded within me. I quickly got ready for work. At the office, the security guard in the lobby looked at me with a bewildered expression and asked who I was looking for. When I said I was Kate Swift, his eyes widened in surprise and he exclaimed, "Oh my!" In the office, a few female colleagues gathered around me. For the first time, I was the center of attention. I felt a strange satisfaction watching their envy. For the first time in years, I felt powerful. When I got home that night, I took more of the pills, doubling the dose from yesterday. I swallowed them eagerly, hoping for the next miracle. The next morning, I woke up with a gnawing hunger. Looking in the mirror, I was startled by the next change. My cheekbones were prominent. My hands were so thin that I could see every blue vein. But I still thought I was beautiful. The intense hunger drove me to the kitchen. I opened the fridge and ravenously ate everything. Bread, cheese, cold cuts, even some withered apples. Strangely, after eating until my stomach was full, I still felt hungry. And when I looked in the mirror, my body even seemed thinner. These pills were a miracle. I could eat as much as I wanted without fear of gaining weight. I took another handful of pills. On the 3rd day, I woke up with a severe headache. In the mirror, my reflection made me step back. My skin had started to flake off at my elbows, knees, and cheekbones. Dry, fish-like scales of skin fell to the bathroom floor every time I moved. But in my deluded mind, I still thought I was getting more beautiful, getting closer to my ideal image. On the way to the office, my vision became blurry. Everything around me swayed. I had to lean against a wall to keep from falling, my breathing coming in short, rapid gasps. When I walked into the office, the air went silent. Everyone looked at me with horror. My boss came over, his face full of worry, and told me I needed to see a doctor immediately. I insisted I was fine because I had a very important meeting that needed me. My boss wanted to cancel the meeting, but I almost screamed. I had been preparing for this project for a month. In the meeting room, I stood in front of the presentation board, trying to focus on the numbers and charts, but everything was fading before my eyes. I felt something warm crawling up my throat. I opened my mouth to continue speaking, but dark red blood gushed out. Everyone in the room screamed in terror. I collapsed to the cold floor, and the world around me sank into darkness. I came to, my head throbbing with pain. My hand was still clutching a bottle of diet pills, not the kind Grace had given me. The light on the ceiling was bright, and I felt dizzy. I slowly got up, my body feeling like an empty shell. I looked around, and was surprised to realize I was in my own home. So all that horrible stuff was just a dream. I had passed out without even knowing it. My throat was parched. I shuffled to the fridge, pushing the door open with trembling hands. Inside, there were only a few withered boxes of salad. Bottles of diet pills filled the shelves. I looked down at my hands. They were gaunt and wrinkled. My joints protruded like sharp stones. This wasn't the beauty I wanted. This was destruction. The nightmare I just had showed me what I would become. These diet pills were killing me every day. The next morning, I took all the pills out to the trash. I went back to the kitchen and cooked a healthy, nutritious breakfast. For the first time in weeks, I could actually taste the food. I started to research how to exercise and eat healthy. A month later, my weight stabilized, and my skin was pinker and more radiant. I felt comfortable in my own body, and I was okay with gaining a few more pounds. Most importantly, I felt like I was actually living. Not because of my appearance, but because I had learned to love and take care of myself. I'm writing this with my hands still trembling, 3 months after escaping the worst nightmare of my life. But I haven't escaped the haunting of it yet. I'm trying to, and I believe I will. I'm telling this story because out there, someone else might be making the same mistake I did. I'm Lewis, 34 years old. Before everything happened, my life revolved around a single issue: my weight. From childhood, I was always bigger than my friends. As an adult, I tried everything from dieting and fasting to going to the gym. But nothing worked. Faye, a girl I dated last year, broke up with me. She said she couldn't keep waiting for me to change. Job opportunities were also lost because of my appearance. That night, I was sitting in my apartment, scrolling through Facebook in a bad mood. Suddenly, an ad popped up. It showed a pill called Slim Fast and promised, "Lose 20 pounds in just 2 weeks, no workout or dieting needed." This was obviously impossible. But I had lost all patience with my previous methods. I clicked on the link, read a bunch of testimonials from users, and looked at the before and after photos. The price wasn't too expensive. I ordered it right away. The package arrived 3 days later in a black box with no label other than a return address in a small town called Marfa, Texas. Inside were 30 pills, each the size of a pea, along with an instruction sheet. Take 1 pill every night before bed. Do not stop taking them halfway through. The effects will appear after the first 3 days. I took the first pill that night. It tasted bitter, leaving an unpleasant aftertaste in my mouth. I woke up the next morning feeling strangely light. The scale showed I had lost 5 pounds. I was overjoyed, thinking this was a good start. I looked forward to every night so I could take the pill. Imagining what I would look like made me smile to myself with happiness. But on the 3rd night, strange things started to happen. In the middle of the night, I suddenly woke up because of a freezing sensation spreading from my feet to my whole body. The room temperature was warm as usual, and the heating system was working fine, but I was trembling as if I were in a freezer. I pulled the blanket up to my neck and tried to fall back asleep. In my daze, I saw myself standing in an empty room with black walls, and there were faint, incomprehensible whispers coming from everywhere. I bolted upright, my heart pounding wildly. The next week, I lost another 17 pounds. My friends started saying I looked different. My best friend called to check on me because I hadn't replied to his messages all week. "Louis, are you okay?" I didn't know what to say. The truth was, I felt like I was living in a hazy dream. I couldn't distinguish between reality and my surroundings anymore. I told my friend I was just busy with work. I don't remember what night it was. I woke up and saw a black figure standing at the foot of my bed. It stood still. I felt it was staring directly at me even though I couldn't see its eyes. At first, I thought I was still dreaming. I closed my eyes tightly, counted to 5, and then opened them. The figure was gone. The next morning, I found scratches on my arm. I didn't remember how I got them. I Googled slim, fast side effects and found a small forum where a few other users reported similar symptoms. They talked about nightmares, the feeling of being watched, and figures. One person named Jesse wrote, "I stopped taking them after 2 weeks, but I still see them. They won't leave me alone." I was scared, but also somewhat relieved to know I wasn't the only one. Plus, I had lost weight in 2 weeks, a result I had never achieved with any other method. I decided to continue, and that was the biggest mistake of my life. By the 3rd week, my health began to decline rapidly. I was constantly tired and had trouble breathing, even just walking from my bed to the kitchen. My skin was pale, and my eyes were deeply sunken. But the worst thing was the craving for the pills. Whenever I thought about stopping, my body reacted violently. I had a pounding headache. My hands and feet shook uncontrollably, and it felt like thousands of ants were crawling through my veins. The figures now appeared not only at night. They followed me to the office, stood on the street corner while I waited for the bus, and even appeared in the mirror while I was in the bathroom. They started to whisper about death. One night, as I was lying in bed in a semi-conscious state, I heard a voice clearly. "Almost there, Louis. It's almost over." I sat up, turned on the light, but the room was empty. However, there were new scratch marks on the wall. The next morning, I decided to seek help. I went to a nutritionist and told him the whole story, showing him the remaining pills. 2 days later, the doctor called me back with results that sent a chill down my spine. The pills contained a few unknown substances, some metabolic stimulants, and animal bone ash. "I believe you have unintentionally participated in an ancient ritual. These pills are designed to open a connection with entities from another dimension. They feed on a person's life energy, and the addiction to the pills is a way to keep them attached to the victim." I felt like my world was collapsing. So what do I do? The doctor referred me to a priest. An exorcism was held at the church. The priest prepared a circle of salt around me, lit candles, and recited prayers. The figures began to appear. This time they weren't just standing still. They moved, circling the salt circle like hungry wolves. They made a hissing sound, like claws scratching. As the priest continued to pray, the entities became more aggressive. They attacked the invisible barrier around the salt circle, and with each impact, I felt like someone was tearing my insides apart. I screamed in pain. "Don't let them pull you out of the circle." After a final, painful hiss, the black figures vanished, and I fainted on the spot. When I woke up, I was lying on a couch in the priest's room. A sense of relief spread through my body, but I knew the battle wasn't really over. My health was severely damaged. It took 3 months of physical therapy for me to walk normally again, and the nightmares still came. More importantly, the story of Slim Fast quickly spread when I decided to speak out and warn everyone. Dozens of others also came forward, telling similar stories. Slim Fast was banned, but the manufacturing company had disappeared without a trace. Now, I spend my time giving talks at community centers, sharing my story with people who are desperately looking for a quick weight loss solution. I want them to understand that there is no magic to changing your body, and the price you pay for shortcuts can be your life. I went through a painful journey with an eating disorder and finally found the path to recovery and self-love. I'm Ren, 19 years old. This story happened when I was 15, a high school student in Akron, Ohio. Back then, I always felt different. I stood out because I was bigger than the other girls in my class. I wasn't obese. I just always wore a bigger size. This made me start to notice my body. The comments became more frequent. A boy in the seat behind me would often whisper to his friend, "Ren looks like a bear in that shirt." I pretended not to hear, but every word burrowed deep into my mind. At home, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, turning from side to side, looking for flaws I had never noticed before. The next day in gym class, the teacher asked the whole class to run a mile around the track in 10 minutes. This was the first fitness test of the year. I ran as hard as I could, but my lungs felt like they were on fire, and my legs felt like lead. I was the last person to finish, taking 3 times longer than everyone else. The teacher looked at his stopwatch and shook his head. I saw the mocking laughter in the class. I put more pressure on myself. That night, I lay in bed and swore to myself that I would change. I would get thin and never let anyone look at me with pity again. I started by cutting down on my meals. Instead of 3 full meals, I ate only 2 small salads. I started running every morning around the neighborhood. After 2 weeks, I lost 5 pounds. My parents praised me a lot. My friends also stopped teasing me and started acknowledging my efforts. I felt happy and full of confidence. But 5 pounds wasn't enough. I wanted more. I started increasing my workout time from 2 hours to 5 hours a day. My meals were reduced to just 1. The results came quickly. The next month, I lost another 10 pounds. My clothes started to hang off me. My mom said my body was perfect. Just try to maintain your current figure and take care of your health. A few boys from other classes started to notice me. I felt like I was in control of everything, but I wanted even more. I increased my workout time every week, and my food intake was also reduced every week. I learned to count every calorie, to track every gram of food I put into my body. The numbers on the scale became an obsession. The first thing I did every morning was step on the scale. My mood for the day depended on it. I started to see changes in my body. My nails became brittle. My hair was falling out more, and I always felt cold even though it was summer. These were warning signs my body was sending, but I ignored them. Until I started to feel dizzy often. In class, I couldn't focus. I was always daydreaming, and I couldn't keep up with the lectures. Sleep became difficult. I would wake up at 2 or 3 in the morning because of hunger, but I refused to eat anything. When I looked in the mirror, I still saw a girl who was too fat. My mind had become so distorted that I couldn't recognize reality. On a weekend afternoon, my sister brought my niece, Zoe, to visit our family. I was sitting in the living room at the time. Zoe and I were very close. She would always run to me first when her mom brought her over to play. But that day, as soon as she saw me, she suddenly stopped. Her face went pale. After a few seconds of standing frozen, she started crying and ran toward her mom. "Mommy, there's a monster in the house." My sister hugged her, looking at me with a horrified expression. I ran upstairs to my room and stood in front of the large mirror. For the first time in months, I actually saw myself. My face was gaunt, my eyes were sunken like bullet holes, and my body was so thin you could count every rib. I looked like a real living corpse. I collapsed to the floor and cried. I regretted what I had done to myself. Remembering the look of fear in Zoe's eyes and her reaction, I felt even more scared and disgusted with myself. I grabbed everything within reach, throwing them at the mirror until it shattered. After a while, I stopped. I heard my sister knock and come in. She sat down next to me and hugged me. "Everyone is here for you. We're going to see a doctor first thing in the morning." I hugged her and cried loudly, while Zoe stood far away, looking at me with a worried expression. At the hospital, the doctor diagnosed me with severe anorexia nervosa. My weight was only 80 pounds, my heart was beating irregularly, and my body was in a state of exhaustion. She needs to be hospitalized immediately. Her current condition is very dangerous, the doctor told my family. 2 weeks in the hospital were the darkest days of my life. My body rejected most foods. My stomach had shrunk so much that it could only hold a few spoons of soup at a time. I had to relearn how to eat slowly, little by little. There were times when I wanted to give up, but the image of the fear in Zoe's eyes reminded me of how far I had gone. I didn't want to be a monster in the eyes of the people I loved. The recovery process lasted for almost 6 months. Now I can look in the mirror and see a healthy and vibrant young woman. I still have difficult days, but I always have my family by my side to encourage me, and most importantly, I have learned to love myself. If you are reading this story and see yourself in it, know that you are stronger than you think. There is no single standard for beauty, and most importantly, you deserve to be loved and cared for at all times.